Well, now, what's it to be, Lord? Another widow? How many's it been? 6? 12? I just remembered. You say the word, Lord. I'm on my way. You always send me money to go forth and preach your word. A widow with a little wad of bills hid away in a sugar bowl. Lord, I am tired. Sometimes I wonder if you really understand. Not that you mind the killings. Your book is full of killings. But there are things you do hate, Lord. Perfume-smelling things, lacy things, things with curly hair.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
So we are wrapping up October. We've had quite a fun month of spooky, scary, sci-fi kind of movies, and we are wrapping it up with a not talked about enough book and movie. I'm very excited to discuss Night of the Hunter, but before we get to that, we are if you're new, maybe you're a fan of Robert Mitchum or Charles Laughton, and here you are. Welcome. We try to give you a brand new episode every single week. And so we are constantly looking for suggestions. We are wrapping up 2024 if you're listening to this later on. And that means we have the holidays coming up. And actually, this could have been a holiday movie. I forgot that
there is a Christmas scene.
it ends at Christmas. We've been doing this show for 10 years. So we've done so many holiday movies. And we are starting to run out of ideas. So if you have some that you'd like to suggest, or you're wondering if we've done them before, there's a few other places where you can make those suggestions. You can meet the listeners of this podcast and interact with us on the internet.
We do have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it, but we're much more interactive in our private Facebook group. So you go to Facebook and you type Book VS Movie Podcast Group, ask to join. And we really do just talk about books and movies there. It's a really nice place to hang out. Other places you can reach out to us, though, on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, you spell out book versus a movie. And then we have an old-timey email, bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, send us your address via the email, and we will drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and like to help keep us going 10 years and going strong, You can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. We're putting out everything from 2021 and previous to that on our Patreon wall. Recently, we put up there Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, The Bad Seed, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Invisible Man. We have an amazing number of episodes there, so go check it out. But we also have an option where you can sign up for free, and we put up trailers and clips from the movie and things like that there. So we want to thank everyone that supports us on Patreon. We really appreciate it. We just use the money for the books and the movies and the costs for the show. And also, you can support us just leaving a review wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure you're subscribed to the show. And I guess, should we talk about YouTube a little bit right now?
Yes, because there's some stuff going down at YouTube and Spreaker, and we're gonna get into it because we've learned that there are some of you who are joining us on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So why don't you fill people in?
We have a platform called Spreaker. That's what we use for our ads, and normally they download to our YouTube channels, but it hasn't been doing that the last couple of episodes. So Margot and I are manually just putting up on each of our YouTubes. We're putting that up there, but we're also decided, like, what the heck? Why don't we once a month do an episode that's a video episode that you can all see, so you can see us putting the show together and playing the clips and things like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. And my YouTube is under my name, Margot Donohue, Donohue. And Margot's, yours is at?
Mine is at She's Nacho Mama, just like all of my social media. So it's SHESNACHOMAMA.
So please follow us and we'll let you know when those special episodes are dropping. And Margot, should we get started? Do we have anything else?
Do we want to mention now about next week?
Yes, we're going to be taking, so it's election cycle, and Margot and I both do some volunteering, and part of our jobs is with the national election. So we are going to be replaying an episode that we had no idea how popular it was when we recorded it originally, and it's turned out it's had thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads. It's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So we are replaying that for all of you next week, and we thank all of you that listened to that episode. It's a true surprise to us.
Yeah. Okay. Of all the Ian Fleming books that we've covered, that is not the one that we would have thought would be the most popular download. We are working on a new episode, and we'll talk about that at the end of this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about that as well. But I have to admit, like, normally by now I would have started the book for that episode, but I can't stop thinking about this one that we're going to be talking about today. This book and movie are haunting me. I cannot stop thinking about them. And for those of you who are new, again, yes, we're both named Margot. I, Margot P., live on the West Coast. Margot D. lives on the East Coast. Margot D. is a great lover of horror and Stephen King and all of those kinds of things. I am a big chicken, and I really can't deal with any kind of slasher, gory, especially that kind of stuff. And so the last episode on The Fly was really beyond my comfort zone. But of all of I have to say, like, this is one of the scariest books and movies I have ever seen. And you don't actually see really any actual violence. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's the same thing in the book. And I had never read this book. I had never seen this movie, although everybody involved with this movie, I am a massive fan of. So I'm very excited to talk about the movie. But let's talk about this book. I can't stop thinking about Night of the Hunter.
It is based on a true story. And so we're going off the rails today. We're just being a little bit different. There is so much to learn just about the origin story for this novel that I am actually creating an episode for one of my other shows called What a Creep. And it's going to be about a man named Harry Powers, who is the inspiration for this story.
And I had never heard of this guy before reading this book.
Right. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, he was a killer in the during the Depression in America. So we'll get to that later. But our author today is Davis Grubb. He was born July 23rd, 1919. He's from Moundsville, West Virginia. And this is really important because he really has an eye for middle America and parts of America. They're not, we would say, coastal elites now. He grew up salt of the earth around that kind of people, and he was a painter and a writer. Writer, not writer. But he had color blindness, and he was very insecure about his artwork. But he used his art to inspire his writing. And Night of the Hunter, absolutely, when he was writing it, he actually would sketch out drawings of what he wanted to do and then write it, which I wish I had that ability.
Right?
I know. And writers.
The book does such a good job. He has such a skill of conjuring this whole image. I mean, you can just see when I saw the movie, it was exactly the way I had imagined it reading the book. Now, he also became, he was also speaking of which, and his ability to do that, he was a very experienced radio writer.
Mm-hmm.
So he would write radio plays, and that's all radio was like, what do they call that? Theater of the mind, right? So you would, with words and some suggestions of sounds, little fancy Foley work, you would conjure a whole world that people could completely picture what was going on, just by the audio that was coming out of their radios. And so he must have been very, very skilled at that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. He also worked in advertising, and a lot of our writers and authors, that's definitely a place where they start out because you have to write punchy sentences. You're under a lot of pressure to really fine tune your writing. So this is based on a true story about a man Harry Powers, who murdered women. He found women in the Lonely Hearts column, which is what they were called at the time. And it was usually widows. who lost their husbands either during the war or because they left. A lot of men left their families because they couldn't support them, and so there were women who were desperate for fathers for their children and husbands to help survive, just their very survival. And he would look for these women, and he murdered many of them and their families. And he was eventually caught. And there's a whole story where he was in West Virginia and he was in a jail, and thousands of people descended upon the jail because he was a child killer and a woman killer. True story. And Davis knew about this because he's from that area. And so he mined that material in 1953, so almost 20 years after it happened, and wrote this story. So this is a fictionalized version. The main character is named Harry, but everything else is just a little bit different. And it's 1953, it's published. It did pretty well. And he had a New York literary agent who was friends with Charles Laughton. Charles Laughton was an actor, a brilliant actor, by the way.
Charles Laughton.
I mean,
so this whole conversation today is going to be about underrated artists of this era. Like, first of all, Davis Grubb, like this book, I don't know why more people don't talk about this book. It's so amazingly well written, so skillful, and Robert Mitchum and just everybody involved with this project. But yeah, Charles Laughton is one of these guys who he's like an actor's actor, certainly, but he's such a strong theater background. We talked about him when we talked about Elsa Lanchester, who was his wife.
Right.
And I don't remember, why were we talking about Elsa Lanchester? I don't remember. There was
one
a
of
reason.
One of our movies had Elsa in it.
Yeah, she's in a lot of things. She was the Bride of Frankenstein and so on. This is his only directing credit,
Mm-hmm.
but he had directed a movie with Burgess Meredith and somebody else.
Irving Allen. And it was called The Man on the Eiffel Tower, 1949.
Which I think is a one that we should do for our mysteries in May next year, because it's based on an Agatha Christie.
Ooh, I didn't know this.
No, I'm sorry. I'm gone too far. I'm wrong rabbit hole. It's not based on an Agatha Christie play, but it is based on a mystery. It's based on one of those Maigret mysteries. You know, Inspector Maigret?
Mm-mm.
Oh, so he's a very famous detective in French literature. And there was a really spectacular series, I think it was on Netflix, starring Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean, playing Detective Maigret. So he's a very famous, well-known detective. And The Man on the Eiffel Tower is one of these Maigret mysteries.
Oh, interesting. I know that Burgess Meredith was hired to be the director for that project, and he was friends with Irving Allen and Charles Laughton. There was someone else that was supposed to be helping to direct the film, and there was some sort of falling out. So Charles Laughton said, Burgess, you can handle it, but Burgess asked him, can you please direct me? Because I trust you. So he's not credited for being director on that project. I know somebody was on Twitter going after me like, no, he only directed one film. I'm like, technically, though, he did. I mean, yeah. But sure. I mean, he really wanted one of his own, and he took over as soon as he got this book. So the agent, Davis Grubb's agent, gave a galley to Charles Laughton's production company, which was under United Artists. And,
I see.
Yes. And so then he read it and he fell in love with this book, and he made sure that they bought it right away. And Davis Grubb is also really interesting, is very much involved with Charles Laughton with the creation of this film. He was consulted, and also he wrote the, what's it called? Storyboarding. He did some storyboarding for Charles Laughton.
Of course he did.
Because Laughton loved this book and said, I have this picture in my head of what this film looks like and what these characters look like and I need to recreate that. What did you think of?
Yeah, Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester, although they lived in Hollywood for the second half of their lives and pretty much all of their married life together, they both of them had a super, super strong theater background. And Charles Laughton, after the legend is that because the critical response, people didn't go see this movie, that Charles Laughton was kind of done directing films, and maybe that's true, but really he focused on directing theater. and he was a very acclaimed theater director. And you can really see that in this film. There's so many moments that are so beautifully lit and staged and composed. But also, getting back to the book, but also they like leap right out of the pages of the book. It's
Mhm.
amazing. Like the book reads like a graphic novel.
It
It's
does.
that evocative of these visuals that and I guess that comes out of having an author who's a visual artist.
Yes.
And it's let's talk about the plot because it's very simple.
Yes.
It's not a there's not a lot of subplots or that going on really. It's a very straightforward kind of a story, but it is, like as I say, one of the scariest, most frightening stories I've ever read.
Yes, it begins and it just jumps right into the story. I mean, we have a convict and he's Harry Powell, and he sees himself as a very Christian man or a God-fearing man.
He has this I love this. Okay, so he's in prison. He's a prisoner. And right away, Grubb is telling us about who this guy is, this Powell. Not Powers, who's the real guy, Harry Powell, who's the character in the book, who's based on Harry Powers. And he's this he how can I put this? Delusions of grandeur, right? He's in prison, and we learn very, very quickly he's in prison he's a serial killer. He's been combing the countryside, finding these vulnerable women, luring them in, taking their money, and either just leaving them or killing them. And thus he is in prison. And he has he has deluded himself into believing that he has like a direct line to God, and that God is the one who is directing him to do all of this because he is a preacher of God's word, and it's his duty to go and in his mind he's somehow like cleaning up the morals of society by getting rid of these women and
their children because
their
they're
children.
evil, he decides.
Yes, because they're also tainted. And so he's really does not have a real firm grip on reality. And we get that right from the start. And he's quoting scripture all over the place. And he's quite a character. And he is sharing a cell with a man named Ben Harper. And Ben Harper is a man who was it a bank he robbed?
Yes, it was a bank. And it's the Depression, we should say. So
yes.
People
a lot
are
of desperate people.
Yeah. And there were a lot of bank robberies back then. Because there wasn't a federal law against it at the time. You could cross state lines, and that's why Bonnie and Clyde got away with as much as they did. It's a very odd, stressful time.
And it's also after World War I. So again, a lot of widows.
Mm-hmm.
He in the process of his bank robbery, he kills 2 men, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so so here he is in prison. And although they caught him, nobody knows what happened to the money that he stole, the $10,000 that he has stolen from this bank. And so here he is they put a bank robber who's killed 2 people in a same cell as a serial killer.
But they think it's a preacher who was arrested for drunk driving or not. It was only for 30 days.
Right. He's not in jail because he's a serial killer. He's in jail because he screwed up and had a little minor infraction. So to the jail's point of view, he's the lesser criminal in this cell. But we, the reader, are let in right away like, this is a really bad dude. He did some really bad stuff.
We should say, by the way, for this crime, because he killed 2 people in robbing this bank. And first of all, $10,000 at that time is worth about $200,000 today. That's a lot of money. You could set somebody up for life with that kind of money. And that's what he was probably thinking. So when he left the bank, he snuck home and told his son, John, hide this money with your life. Don't tell anybody.
He has a wife and 2 very small children. So his son is very small. And his daughter is even smaller. And he puts this horrendous burden on his son. He's like, hey, son, the cops are going to be here any second because I killed 2 guys and I stole this money. And it's for you.
And then the blue men show up and you realize it's the police. The boy
It's the
doesn't
police.
understand. You get from everybody's point of view, which I also
I
love.
love, right? It's so great about this book. So this poor little boy, his father dumps this humongous secret on him, makes him swear not to tell anybody. So we're going to spoil everything, y'all.
Yes, we
So
forgot
just,
to
you
say
know.
that. Yeah.
So he hides the money. They decide to hide the money in the little girl's, the little sister's doll that she carries with her everywhere, Miss Jenny, this doll. And he makes both the children swear they're not allowed to tell anybody. You don't tell anybody, no matter what happens. This is for when you grow up. This is for much later, you know, when all this is long gone. So the cops come and they haul him off. And here he is in prison with this super, super bad criminal mastermind who is trying to everything he can to wheedle the information out of Ben. He gets Ben to talk in his sleep, and Ben reveals like little clues, but nothing, no hard, direction in terms of where the money is, but enough to make the preacher aware that the money is there somewhere, and somebody at Ben's house knows where this money is, probably.
Yeah.
And so Ben, because he's not in for, again, he's not in for being a serial killer. He's just in for some little minor crimes. He eventually gets released. And so for all the world knows, again, it's the Depression. Another thing that was very going on in the culture at the time were these kind of tent revivals, Bible thumping. People were again very at a very low ebb. A lot of poverty, just so much going on in the United States.
The Dust Bowl.
As in everywhere. Yeah. The Dust Bowl. I mean,
right.
just desperate times. So he starts wandering he goes back to his serial killing, posing as a preacher and luring unsuspecting women. And he's already good at that. He's already an ace at that by the time he decides to go after Ben Harper's wife and 2 kids. He shows up and he's charming. Now his wife is kind of a simple lady,
Well, her husband, by the way, Ben is executed in prison. He's hanged.
He's hanged for his crime. And she's now a widow, but she's also a widow with the widow of a murderer. She has a lot of baggage, and she also has a lot of stigma in terms of like her community that she lives in. They all judge the entire family, including the children, for this thing. So there are a few neighbors who kind of, out of their Christian charity, look after, what's the wife's name? Pearl? No, Pearl's the little girl.
Willa.
Right? Willa, thank you. They look after Willa and the kids, and they give Willa a job, but they're kind of they're super nosy and meddly, and they're like, you need to get remarried, and you can't really raise these 2 kids on your own, Willa. You're not that bright, and maybe you should, oh hey, look, there's this new preacher in town. He seems kind of cool, and they really, especially the wife, I love her name is Icy Spoon. They're the Spoons, Walter and Icy Spoon.
And Walter's terrified of her, by the way.
Icy Spoon rules with an iron fist, the whole town practically.
And Icy Spoon also says things like, I lie in bed with my husband and I don't think about anything but canning my vegetables. Like, she is... Wow.
Yeah. She's a piece of work, Miss Icy Spoon. And Icy Spoon decides that, Willa needs to get married, and this preacher over here, he needs to get married too. So I'm going to do everything I can to get these 2 together. That is what she does. Again, Willa's not the brightest bulb on the family tree. So she's very susceptible to manipulation, let's say, which is wonderful for our preacher, Mr. Powell. So he eventually persuades her to marry him.
Yeah.
And she's so, again, very simple. She believes like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be married to you now. And she was in love with Ben. So, I mean, she was really, truly in love with Ben. And so she's like, okay, well, I don't really love this guy, but I could, if I try real hard, I could apply myself and learn to love him. I guess, this is my job to do now. Preacher right away is like, listen, Willa, I'm a good Christian man, so we're not going to do any kind of fooling around or anything. So don't get it into your head that you're going to be sinning with me. And so he makes her feel ashamed. He completely manipulates her into feeling like she's less than, feeling like she's a sinner, like she's not worthy of him, really, really dominates and manipulates her. And he also deduces, because he's a shrewd serial killer, he deduces that the children know where the money is, that Willa probably doesn't know because she's not that bright. So Ben probably didn't trust her with the info.
Yes.
And so, which is true. And he needs to get at these children. So he tries charming them, and that works with the little girl, Pearl. But John's pretty smart. John's a smart little cookie, and he's like not having it. Like, I don't know who you are, mister, but you don't seem like any kind of preacher to me. And I don't know, I don't like the way I don't like the way you talk to her. And so he knows right away that why this guy is there and what's up. But he's also just a little boy.
I know, he's a child
on who all this stuff has been heaped. And he's having to deal with the burden of this secret. And he feels he has sworn to his dad that not only will he keep the secret, but that he will take care of his sister.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, one morning, Willa is gone. Poof. And the preacher goes to his old friends, Icy and Walter Spoon. He says, she left me because she's a sinner. I guess it's up to me to take care of these two little children. I guess this is what God wanted. And that Willa and Walter are like, oh, you poor thing, you poor man. Let us bring you food. Let us help. How can we help? You're such a wonderful person for taking care of these two children. And John is like, I don't like this one bit. This does not smell right to me. But he has a real problem that Pearl has totally been charmed by the preacher. She calls him daddy now.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, I swore I would keep the secret only to tell my daddy. And he's my daddy now. So what does she do? She freaking tells him.
Because she's 5. She's like 4 or 5.
Teeny.
She's a little kid. And it's some stability that comes into her life. I'm sure she went to church. I'm sure she believed in God. And so she probably, this is a man of God. I would have been like, oh, okay. I mean, I loved my dad, but if he was gone and, somebody else comes along and it also helps their reputation, the fact that she's attached to this preacher now versus the bank robber that was executed. John, we get John's point of view. John just sees right through him right away, but also knows, I'm a kid. Nobody believes me. Nobody listens to me. I'm small. Like, what can I do? And he has one adult who's the uncle character.
Now this is interesting because, this book is just so fascinating. All of the adults, except for one, and we'll get to her later, but all of the adults are so creepy and suspect and cannot be trusted or counted on for anything. Willa is such a flibbertigibbet, she cannot possibly protect herself, let alone her children.
Mm-hmm.
And here they are in danger. And John, the boy, has a friend, Mr. Birdie or Captain Birdie or something like that.
Or Uncle Birdie, something.
Uncle Birdie. He calls him Uncle Birdie. And Uncle Birdie was a friend of his dad's. So there's that.
Yeah.
and Willa, this isn't in the movie at all. In the movie, Uncle Birdie is just he's this kind of hapless, like he drinks, he's a widower, he's a lonely old guy. But in the book, Willa refers to him as a dirty old man and says to her kids, don't you go anywhere near that Mr. Birdie.
Right.
You stay away from him. And we learn that John is friends with this guy because he knew his dad and he tells him about his dad and he never tries anything weird with him. But because of what the mom says the whole time that he's with this Mr. Birdie, you, the reader, are like, what's going on with this Mr. Birdie? I don't know. He's lived alone by the river, down by the river.
By the river.
He's a little weird and very lonely and I don't know. He doesn't get that reputation out of nowhere that the mom would say that to the kids, but okay. But so John tells Uncle Birdie like, what's up? And he's like, yeah, listen, kid, if you're ever in trouble, you come and I'll help you. You just make sure and you come to me. You come to Uncle Birdie. And he's like, okay. So he takes his sister and they run to go see Uncle Birdie. Now, Uncle Birdie, in the meantime, had been out on the river. He was fishing and he catches his hook on something. He looks down and like, oh, what does he see? He sees John and Pearl's mom tied up to a car that's at the bottom of the river.
With her throat slashed.
Her throat slashed. And he's like, and this is why in the book it's a little more plausible than in the movie. In the movie, you're like, just go to the police, dude. Like, what are you talking about? But in the book, because he has this reputation of being a sinister old man who lives down by the river, he feels like he can't go to anybody about this, what he's found, without them thinking that he did it, because they all suspect him of being suspicious.
Mhm.
And so he doesn't go to the police, and instead he gets very drunk. And so when the kids show up, he's too drunk to help them. And so they're like, well, now what? But I don't remember if he tells them, he directs them to take a boat, but they get on a boat.
It's a skiff, which is it's a very cheap version of a boat, but
It's barely a boat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I wouldn't take one for a super long distance. So that's the whole point. Like, the kids run away because so he knows that they know, everybody knows what's going on. And John tells his sister, like, we got to get out of here now. And she's a little kid. She doesn't understand. They're hungry. He ate dinner in front of them and wouldn't give them any food because he's trying to get them to tell them where the money is. And so they take off and in this boat, and it's so scary. I mean, they're just floating down this river.
Two little teeny children in a boat on a raging river, running away from a serial killer who knows where they're going because they're going downstream.
Right.
So he all he has to do, he doesn't have a car because he's dumped his car in the river now. So he just has to find a way to get some kind of transportation to outrun them, and then just what do they call that? Ambush them.
Mm-hmm.
So they know at any point he's going to turn up. And a lot of the book is this chase between Powell and these two children. And meanwhile, Pearl, who again is a tiny child, but one is very conflicted because she does feel like this. She's been told that this guy is her daddy and he's a man of God. And the children don't know that he's killed their mom. They just know that the mom is gone at this point. And so Pearl is very, very conflicted. And, little children are hard to keep quiet. So, when they're hiding, John's like, okay, Pearl, you got to be real quiet. Like, do not make a sound. And Pearl's like, what?
I know adults like that, by the way. They're just not exactly tethered to the reality of the moment.
So she blows their cover like time and time again because she just can't be quiet. And they're running and they've got this doll. And eventually, and like that whole scene, the whole chase, it's so terrifying. These moments where he almost catches them and they get away, and he almost catches them and they get away, and they're starving. And it's the depression, and everybody's starving. It's not like he could just go any old place and somebody's going to help them. There's no place they can go. And they turn up, fortunately, on the shore, and there's some girls there. And these girls go, the girls go, here, come with us, we'll get you some food. And they take them to the house, and this woman there named Rachel. I was like, whoa, you kids, I don't know where you've been or what's happened to you, but come on in. Let's get you cleaned up. Let's get you fed. I guess you live here now. And she's this woman who, again, it's the depression. There are lots of childless children wandering about, a lot of homeless people. So she takes in these children as they come by, and we get her point of view. We get everybody's angle, like each of the children, each of these girls that live with Rachel. Rachel, we learn, is a widow, and she has a son that she raised, and who moved away with his own family to a city, and they're fine. Her son and his family are fine, but they don't live close by, and he helps support her and everything, but she doesn't get to see him very much, and so she has taken in she has just made a practice of taking in these children throughout the depression, and feeding them and giving them a solid home to grow up in. Everybody in the town knows her and knows that's what she does, and so she turns up in town buying groceries. She needs more food because she's got 2 more kids. And everybody's like, oh, look at you. You got 2 more, huh? Look at you, Miss Rachel. And she's like, yep, 2 more. Here we go. And what are you going to do? God sent them to me. So she's feeding them, and she's doing that, teaching them as in her way about the Bible and stuff like that. And she's being very sweet. She's the one good adult in this book. She's literally the only good adult in this book.
That actually really cares about these kids.
Genuinely
and
cares
is willing
about
to
them.
stick her neck out and is willing to extend herself to take
Yes.
care of them. And then she has the oldest kid is 13 and her name is Ruby. And Ruby's is an adolescent. She's kind of going through a phase.
A little wild.
You know, she likes boys and the boys notice her and she's chafing a little bit, you know, being surrounded by little kids all the time. And in the meantime, Preacher Harry is going by horse that he stole. He goes town to town trying to find
the river.
The river. And then he winds up at this town and he hears about there's a woman who has these kids. And he hears from the local people and they say, oh, the oldest one is that Ruby over there. And he and Ruby make eye contact and she notices him. She's at that age, you know, she's kind of feeling herself. She meets him at a clandestine kind of meeting with him and kind of spills the beans that there's a kid named John and Pearl and they're staying with their mother and they just showed up and they're nice kids.
He flatters her and gives her attention and in that way wheedles this information out of her. She's gladly just singing like a canary because nobody ever pays attention to her, tells her she's pretty or anything like that. And she thinks that this man is in love with her and she thinks that she's in love with him and she's now met the love of her life. And so she's just telling them all about Pearl and John and this doll. And he asks about the doll. Oh yes, they have this doll and they never let us play with the doll. And she's very innocent. She's very naive. And so she leaves thinking that like, oh, this is I've met the man I'm going to marry. And she goes back and tells Rachel like, you'll never guess, Miss Rachel. I finally found Mr. Right.
She comes out with a movie magazine.
Yeah.
Which is pricey. Like
he bought for her.
Yeah, so she's like, where'd you get this? And then it gets out of her. And then Rachel at first thinks, oh, well, cool. Their father's coming. That's good. I'm glad to take care of them for this short amount of time. And
yeah. But then she asks the children and Pearl's like, oh, my daddy. And John's like, yeah, that's not our dad. And she can tell that something's really up and do not, she's got her little intuition and her intuition is like, do not let the children go with this man. He is not what he says he is. And she runs him off of her property. And he tells her, he's like, I'm going to be back. I'll be back though. I'll be back.
You're just one woman.
Yeah. She's one little tiny little old lady.
Yeah, exactly.
With all these little kids. And he's a big, scary serial killer. So she knows he's coming back. So she gets the children all together and waits for him with a shotgun. And sure enough, he turns up. It is maybe scarier even in the book than it is in the movie, because in the book, as this is happening, and again, not much is happening. She's sitting there in the dark with the kids and a shotgun. The guy is sitting outside.
Singing.
And then singing.
Ooh.
And it's so creepy. But in terms of like actual action, that's all. He's sitting there, she's sitting here. But in the book, while that's happening, you get what John thinks is going on, and you get what Rachel thinks is going on, and you get what the preacher thinks is going on. You get all the different points of view of all the children. So the suspense just builds and builds and builds and builds. And eventually he gets in the house, he comes at her and she shoots him. She's not like a sniper. She shoots him and she wounds him, but she doesn't kill him. She doesn't murder him. She doesn't know that. She just like wildly shoots, but she does hit him, gets himself out of the house, and he gets into her barn, and she calls into town to like, hey, send the police. I've got this guy in my barn. He tried to break into my house and kill us all. But I got him. I shot him and he's in the barn. Come get him. So here come the blue men again. John, just like Pearl was confused about whether to trust the preacher, John sees these blue men who are now coming to save him.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the men who took his dad away, and so he's a little guy. I cannot stress enough that he is just a little guy. And it churns up just all these, it's just too much and he finally just breaks and he grabs the doll and he goes running over to the police where they're handcuffing the preacher and he throws the doll at them. Just take it. I don't want anything else to do with this money. It's not worth it. Just take it. Just take it. Just take it. And and Rachel just scoops them up and then we understand that they're going to live together from now on. And the police take the preacher to the county or the town jail, and he's going to be there awaiting trial. Now, we know that Ben Harper was hanged for robbing a bank and killing 2 people in the process of the robbery. What do you think they're going to do with this guy who's been murdering women and kids all over the place, right? So they have his trial, and who shows up? Walter and Icy Spoon. Because they're not done. They're not done being terrible people. Well, Icy is not even near done with her meddling. What does Icy do? Icy Spoon rallies together a lynch mob.
Yeah.
And at this point, the story switches to Ruby's point of view. You get a little bit of this in the movie, but it's much more in the book. And it is just heartbreaking because Ruby, again, is this naive child who really believes that this preacher guy is in love with her and is the only person who has ever seen, what a wonderful, pretty girl she is. And she makes up her mind that she's going to go free him. So she packs her bag because she thinks she's going to run away with him. And she's walking to the jail thinking that she's somehow going to persuade them to let him go. And as she's walking to the jail, this lynch mob comes up behind her. And Ruby, in her innocence, goes, they see he's innocent too. They're coming to help me get him free. Oh, this is so wonderful. And we can finally be together and get married and we're going to run away together. And of course, that's not what happens.
No. Poor Ruby.
Because a lynch mob does one thing.
Exactly.
And she slowly realizes. So we're seeing all of this through Ruby's eyes. It slowly kind of just starts to barely dawn on her what is going on. And they do, and it kind of, it's very cinematic and it's sort of like that goes to black because we don't get into the graphics too much of what they do to him.
Mm-hmm.
We know they got him. We know that Ruby was there, but the next scene is sometime later. It's Christmas now.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is behind them. All of this nastiness is behind them. And, the children have made their various Christmas gifts for Rachel, which is very sweet. These little homemade, this and that. And John doesn't have anything that he can make. He's not crafty like that. And so he just goes and gets an apple that's already in the house and wraps it up and gives it to her. And she's so wonderful that with every of these gifts, she acts like it's the most precious jewel that could ever be bestowed on a single person. And she's just completely overwhelmed with the generosity and the cleverness of these kids. And then she has gifts for each of them. The girls each get a dress and John gets this watch. And in the book, it's a cheapy little watch. It's not like an amazing watch, but, because she doesn't have a lot of money. She has to stretch it over a lot of mouths, the money that she gets. But she gets this watch and he is so, you almost get it in the movie, but in the book, how much that means to him and how loved and special and seen that gift makes him feel. And the book describes how he goes to, he can't even sleep because he's just lying in bed, feeling the watch tick on his chest, it's so wonderful. So it has this happy ending, he I hate to say it, but he ends up with a really nice mom that he didn't have in the first place.
No, and he's going to be taken care of. And she's going to look out because we have to remember he's in the first grade. He's little, He's such a
Yeah.
young boy, and he's
Yeah.
handling so much in it. And a lot of people, and Rachel's the only one who understands like how much burden women and children put up with in this world. And he makes a point of stating that. And that's also Davis Grubb, who's, he said his mother was one of those women that took care of everybody around her and became a social worker because she was so passionate about that. So he was very, very, he was very passionate about making sure that all of his characters, especially his women characters, had some, shadings to their personality, that they didn't just serve as just the mother figure, but they really had something going.
I really appreciated that because Willa's very simple and Icy is like garbage. And
but how much did you want to eat her food? That sounded delicious. That fried chicken
it does
and then
sound
apple
very
cobbler.
delicious. Yes, it does. But Rachel, like when you first meet Rachel, and I have to admit, like when I first saw her, I was like, oh, she's just going to be like the angel that comes down from. But as we are with her for the rest of the book, she's a three-dimensional person with a history and regrets and she's doing the best that she can do. She just is really, she could easily have just been written in as like the absolute pure, Glinda the Good Witch comes down from heaven and scoops up these children and everybody's happily ever after. But she's very grounded. She knows what's up. She loves these children and she really genuinely is trying to, give them as much of a home as she possibly can. But she's not deluding herself about what kind of a world it is out there. And just, and she shot a guy.
Yes. And would do it again if she had to.
Yeah. And so she's smart, that she incapacitates them and calls the police, if she had taken the time to call the police first, he would have gotten them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I really loved this book so much. It just is, again, terrifying, but also just the way that he gives us, because that doesn't always work when an author switches, the points of view.
We've talked about that. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like unwieldy. I'm like, who is this again? And what do we do? But each character has such a unique perspective on what's happening, including our killer, that you never get confused about it. And it just really adds to the suspense, because in terms of the action, there's not that much that happens. Ben's already in jail when the book opens. So what happens is this preacher's in a prison cell. Preacher gets out, goes and marries the guy's wife, and then the kids run away and he chases the kids for most of the book. And the kids end up at this lady's house and she shoots him. I mean, and that's what happens. Then he gets lynched. And but the fact that we're going through all these different points of view and seeing how each of these people are dealing with the situation that they're in is what makes it so suspenseful and so riveting. It's just amazing.
And that I should say, it's a creepy thing, and I'll probably mention this in my other show, but that especially there was frontier justice and mob justice. There were a lot of stories about that in the 1930s as well. Especially if it was children involved. There's a very famous one that happened in San Jose, California, where people surrounded jail. And so this is a story. These stories are being passed around and talked about in the news.
Well, To Kill a Mockingbird has the lynch mob. Sometimes they would get the person and sometimes they wouldn't, the mob. So it's hard for us to imagine, fortunately, what that must have been like. And you get the impression, not just with this book, but also To Kill a Mockingbird, that like it was just like, well, I guess we're going to have a lynch mob now. It was just a thing that people would just assumed that that's really something that somehow just the actual justice system was not enough.
Prison systems were not meant to be rehabilitation centers. They were just meant to punish. No. Yeah. And sometimes people that should be punished aren't punished. And so the town will say, and back then you can get away with things. Yeah. But
so
really well done. Really well written.
So well done.
I mean, it's a page turner. And you and I both were talking. We talked the other day about it. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
But sometimes, like at night, it really creeped me out. I had to read it at daytime.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too. I had to read it in daylight. I mean, it's really so scary. The whole, again, most of the book is him chasing those children. It is one of the scariest. Like, what is that book? Jurassic Park. Like, so much of Jurassic Park is the children being chased by dinosaurs and monsters. And I was like, can we just can the monster just get these kids already? Just because they can't. But this is just, it's so much scarier and so much more suspenseful. And he's so much more of a monster
Yes.
than those raptors. Boy, it's really, really something. I just loved the whole thing. I loved all the characters, and it was just so interesting that the choices and so plausible.
Yeah.
Too, which makes it chilling.
It was based on a true story. So yeah. Should we get to this movie?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to
talk about scary.
Oh my God. All right. So we're going to play the trailer. This is the original trailer for the 1955 film, The Night of the Hunter.
Ben never told you he throwed it in the river, did he?
I can hear you whispering, children, so I know you're down there. I can feel myself getting awful mad.
Here is all the passion and suspense, the heart-pounding warmth of the best-selling novel that gripped millions.
Burl, wake up! Come on, Burl!
Superb, unforgettable performances by an extraordinary array of talent.
Figured I was gone, huh?
Run, hide in the staircase. Run quick! Ruby, shit! What do you want?
I want them kids.
I'm giving you to the count of 3 to get out of here, then I'm coming across the kitchen shooting you.
The combined powers of Paul Gregory and Charles Laughton brought the King Mutiny Court-Martial to Broadway. Now the screen receives that same creative, electrifying impact. The Night of the Hunter.
As we said, Charles Laughton is our director. The screenplay, James Agee, who's
Yeah.
wow.
I mean, they really did this right. They really just did everything
he also
absolutely perfectly.
He also wrote The African Queen, so we talked about him before. He died at 45. The same year this movie came out. It's so sad because he's very, very talented. It's such a smart script. Apparently, it was very big. It was like 280 pages when they started, and that's way too much. But they whittled it down. Yeah, and then Charles Laughton worked with Davis Grubb about the script and asked him, can you give me any of your artwork that you had at that time? Davis Grubb gave them the knife that Robert Mitchum carries around in this movie.
Amazing.
I mean, it's just spectacular. So I'll just go through the cast here. Shelley Winters is Willa Harper.
Perfect.
And if you
She's
only know her as Grandma from Roseanne. Yeah. My favorite of her roles is, or we talked about Poseidon Adventure. But Lillian Gish, I mean, classing up the joint.
Love this woman.
Rachel Cooper, Billy Chapin as John Harper, who's such a good actor. He's so young and he really holds his own.
Spectacular. Both of those kids.
Really well done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sally Jane Bruce as Pearl, James Gleason as Uncle Bertie. Evelyn Varden as Icy Spoon, and who's great. Just a battle axe. Love her. Don, I've heard it pronounced Bedo and Bedeau as Walt Spoon.
That's high.
Who apparently on his first day on the set was shaking when he was standing next to Robert Mitchum. And Mitchum said, "Are you sick? Are you cold? What's going on?" He goes, "I'm just so nervous to be working with you." Aww. Isn't that sweet? Peter Graves as Ben Harper.
Where's your mom?
Out shopping. You're bleeding, Dad.
Listen to me, John. This money here, we gotta hide it before they get to me. There's close to $10,000. Where? Under a rock in the smokehouse? No. Under the bricks in the grape harbor? No, they dig for it. Sure. That's the place.
That's him.
He probably still has that gun.
Listen to me, son. You've got to swear. Swear means promise. First, swear you'll take care of little Pearl. Guard her with your life, boy. Then swear you won't never tell where the money's hid, not even your mom.
Yes, Dad.
You understand?
Not even her?
You got common sense, she ain't. When you grow up, that money will belong to you. Now stand up straight and look me in the eye. Raise your right hand. Now swear, I'll guard Pearl with my life.
I will guard Pearl with my life.
And I won't never tell about the money.
And I won't never tell about the money.
You, Pearl, you swear too.
Ben Harper.
I'm going now, children. Goodbye.
Drop that gun, Harper. We don't want the kids hurt.
Just mind what you swore, son. Mind, boy.
Don't. Dad.
He was the A&E guy for years. And Mission Impossible, of course.
Yep.
Gloria Castillo as Ruby, who's really good in this.
Isn't she wonderful?
Oh my
I know.
God.
I know.
And Paul Breyer is Bart the Hangman. There's a bunch of people who are also not credited. Apparently, there was a lot of just
so many
friends,
great, like, just townspeople
character
roles
actors
that are wonderful, wonderfully cast. I can't remember. There was another movie we talked about like this that it really. Oh, To Kill a Mockingbird again. Going back to Kill a Mockingbird, it's very clearly shot on a soundstage, but you're not mad at it. It's so theatrical. It's you just in that world, and the combination, the lighting, the set design, the use of actual exteriors. Very strategically, like when the children are out in the schoolyard and the other kids are making fun of them that their father's hanged. Like
hang
where
hang
these
hung,
kids?
hang hang
Oh,
hung. That
gosh.
song they sing. Oh my God.
That's in the book. Just all of it, particularly the lighting. The lighting is so genius in this movie. The scene where Powell murders Willa, and they're in that attic room that almost looks like a church because of the pointy roof of the room, and he's quoting scripture, and you see his hand go up with the knife. It's amazing. Robert Mitchum. I mean,
They wanted Gary Cooper, but then
he'd have been good. He'd have been good.
Yeah, but he's not Mitchum, because there's some dangerous quality that he has. And apparently, Robert Mitchum at the time, he was a heavy drinker. A lot of men were at that time, a lot of actors. But he also had been arrested.
There's a culture.
Yes. He had also been arrested for marijuana, which was very scandalous for the time. And apparently he could be ornery, let's just say. So he kind of he understood this character. He understood the assignment. He could play this character better than anybody. And I love Shelley Winters in here. I think it's like her most subtle performance.
You get this woman who just does not have the wherewithal to have any idea what's going on around her. She's manipulated by everybody. Icy's like, you're going to do this, do that. And she's like, okay, I guess I'm doing this now. Icy's like, you're going to marry this guy. I'm like, okay, if you say so, Icy. Am I pretty enough? Okay. And then when she marries Powell, like everything he says to her, she just completely believes right out of the box. She hook, line, and sinker. And we get this thing in the movie, which I love. There's this scene where he has gathered some of the townspeople into this kind of tent revival thing with torches. There's a lot of symbolism of these torches and the fire. And he's having her testify to her sin committed with her husband by actually being in love with him.
Right.
Her first husband, and how he saved her. And she's just so vulnerable to shift of the wind, And so when he is murdering her, she doesn't even run or scream or anything. She's just like, well, I guess this is what's happening now. I must have just brought this on myself. Okay, here we go. Yeah, you just feel so sorry for this woman. She can't even be there for her own kids.
She feels like she sinned so
she's that
badly.
Incapable.
Yeah. She thinks she's sinned. She thinks she's a sinner. Yeah. This man just took pity on her, and she's lucky enough to found someone who's going to take care of her kids for her. Like, she kind of deserves to die, which is it's terrible and it's heartbreaking, but it's also terrifying because now he's in charge of these kids.
God works in a mysterious way his wonders to perform.
Yes, I was with Brother Harper right up to the end. Now that I'm no longer employed by the penitentiary, it is my joy to bring this small comfort to his loved ones.
It's a mighty good man would go out of his way to bring a word of cheer to a grieving widow.
So you ain't with the state no more?
No, brother, I resigned only yesterday. The heart-rending spectacle of them poor men was just too much for me. Ah, little lad, you're staring at my fingers. Would you like me to tell you the little story of right hand, left hand? The story of good and evil? H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old Brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low. L-O-V-E. You see these fingers, dear hearts, these fingers has veins that run straight to the soul of man. The right hand, friends, the hand of love. Now watch and I'll show you the story of life. These fingers, dear hearts, is always a warring and a tugging one against the other. Now watch 'em. Old brother left hand hates a fighting, and it looks like love's a goner. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hot dog loves a winning. Yes, sirree. It's love that won, and old left hand hate is down for the count.
I never heard it better told. I wish every soul in this community could get the benefit. Oh, you just got to stay for our picnic Sunday.
No, I must wend my way downriver on the Lord's business.
You ain't leaving in no hurry if we can help it.
John, mind your manners. Take that look off your face. Act nice.
Why, you don't mean no impudence, do you, boy? Do you, boy? How many's the time poor Brother Ben told me about these young'uns?
What'd he tell you?
Why, he told me what fine little lambs you and your sister both was.
Once again, John can see right through this guy and doesn't trust him. And he's constantly saying to Pearl, don't tell him anything. Just keep your mouth.
She's like, why not?
Why?
He's my daddy.
And she doesn't understand. She's cutting up the money like it's paper dolls that she could make. She doesn't.
Oh my gosh.
I know, that drove me crazy.
I know.
I was like,
but
oh my God.
These kids are so good. They are so, it's these two small, okay, just to give you an idea, these two small children against Robert Mitchum for a huge chunk of the movie. It's just these two children versus Robert Mitchum. He's so terrifying when he's coming after them and they're in the boat and he's just screaming like an animal and waving the knife around. And oh my goodness, it's so scary.
It's
terrifying. So scary.
Yeah. Apparently, Charles Laughton was not much of a kid person and had lost his temper with the children. So that became Mitchum's job, was to get the acting performance from the kids, which worked out, which, I mean,
they're spectacular. Every single child in this movie is so good. And there's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Again, every single person involved in this production is underrated. We don't talk about Robert Mitchum enough and how amazing he is. We don't talk about Laughton enough, Charles Laughton enough. We certainly don't talk about this book enough. And Lillian Gish, you guys. Lillian Gish started in the film industry when she was a child. She was like a teenager. She and her younger sister, Dorothy, got involved in acting through their childhood friend, Gladys, who later became a little person named Mary Pickford.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of her.
Yeah. Mary Pickford, who, again, one of the most famous movie stars of all time. One of the reasons we have Hollywood. One of the founders of United Artists.
Yep.
Mary Pickford introduced the Gish sisters to D.W. Griffith, and therefore, 2 stars were born. And they were just, I mean, I get why we don't talk about the silent era very much because, I get it, but they're acting in those movies and they're not saying a single word, there's just their physicality and the way, but she continued to be a very, they would cast her from time to time and she's always brings it. Did you ever see The Whales of August?
No.
You guys, put this on your list. The Whales of August. It is Bette Davis's final film, I believe. If it's not her final, it's her next to final film. It's this movie about 2 older sisters in their 80s, Lillian Gish and Bette Davis. And Lillian Gish is sort of her sister's caretaker. And Bette Davis, of course, is cantankerous as only Bette Davis can be. They have a friend who comes to visit them. They're on vacation. It's like their last summer vacation. They used to go whale watching, I think in Maine or something like that. And it's like their last time we gather, the last time they're going to be in their family home and doing this. And their friend comes to do this with them. And it's just these 3 women who've had a relationship for many, many years. And they're now in their 80s. Ann Southern, I think, plays the friend. It's just a beautiful movie. She is just as strong. Lillian Gish is just as formidable a performer in that film as she is in this one, as she is in her silent era. She is just a force, and just like in the book, when you meet her, you're like, oh, here's this kindly little old lady type, and oh no, she's got an iron spine, and she's the one person who's going to take down Robert Mitchum, like as he's mowing his way through the countryside. She's the one who finally puts a stop to him and is also being there for these children and also sees Ruby and what she knows exactly what's going on with Ruby. And she's like not having it.
Yeah.
She's going to put a stop to it, help redirect this child onto the right path. She's just amazing. I just love her in absolutely everything. What a brilliant choice.
Laughton was a big fan of silent pictures and actually used those visuals as his guide to making this movie. He also brought with him his editor and his composer on the set because he wanted, he's very holistic. He wanted everyone's input, everyone to be on board. Like this is not just what we're shooting today. This is the reason why we're shooting this scene. This is what has to happen.
Amazing.
And there's some clips that I saw that they were like, this was the first take. They're so good. I mean,
how can that possibly be?
I don't know.
Miss Cooper! What? The man!
Good morning, ladies.
I do.
Why, you're Miss Cooper, I take it.
It's about that John and that Pearl.
Oh, them poor little lambs. To think I never hope to see them again in this world. Oh, dear madam, if you was to know what a crown of thorns I've borne in my search for them stray chicks.
Ruby, go fetch them kids.
Oh, madam, I see you're looking at my hands. Would you like me to tell you the little story of left hand and right hand, the tale of good and evil? It was with this left hand that old brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low.
Them kids is yours?
My own flesh and blood.
Where's your missus?
She run off with a drummer during prayer meeting.
Where's she at?
Down the river somewhere, Parkersburg, maybe Cincinnati. One of them Sodoms of the Ohio River.
She took them kids with her?
Oh, heaven only knows what unholy sights and sounds them innocent little babes has heard in the dens of perdition where she dragged them.
Right funny, ain't it, how they rode all the way upriver in a 10-foot John boat?
Are they well, Miss Cooper?
A sight better than they was.
Gracious, gracious, you are a good woman, Miss Cooper.
How you figuring to raise them 2 without a woman?
Oh, the Lord will provide. The Lord is merciful. Oh, what a day this is. And there's little John.
What's wrong, John?
Come to me, boy.
What's wrong, John?
Didn't you hear me, boy?
John, when your dad says come, you should mind him.
He ain't my dad.
It's so good. I mean, and it is very like a play in that way, that you're just getting this fresh It does. It has this freshness to it. You just don't see something like this every day. It is. I don't understand why people didn't lose their freaking minds over this film. It's so good. Every note is hit here.
There's a very famous scene. Shelley Winters, her character is killed, and she's in the water. And he threw her in the water with this Model T. Uncle,
it's haunting.
It's haunting, and the drunk uncle, has his hook on, and he's fishing out there, and he's actually catching her. And then when you look through the water, it's very clear. I mean, it's not like a real pond. I mean, it's very, very.
No, it's not.
But
yeah,
you know what?
I know.
It's
calm down,
calm your teas, guys. This is really good stuff here. I love that shot, and it's a mannequin, and they have her face they had put on it, and it's a very famous shot. I think there's some things that people kind of picked at it, and movie distribution was very different at that time. I mean, now ever since Jaws, they started doing mass releases where there's at least 1,500 theaters. I mean, back then they went from town to town to town. They saw how it worked on the coast and then moved in, and it never really had that many advocates that thought this, because there's no Oscar nominations for anything, and it's how is that possible?
How it's so innovative, and just to keep in mind, this is 7 years before Mitchum makes Cape Fear.
Yes,
7 years.
I think people it's good, but it's one of those movies that in revival houses, it really took off in the 70s. And there was just this appreciation for independent filmmakers. But Charles Laughton apparently was so upset that it never got the chance that it deserved that he went to stage, and he just stayed on the stage. And apparently he liked it there because he liked to noodle around and let's try something different tonight. That was kind of more his bag.
It's not set there and you can't change it, and there it goes out into the world, which I get that. I don't understand the reception to this film. I don't understand. There's something went wrong that they didn't capture the imagination of I don't know.
Somebody didn't get it. And that's just, and people are fallible, but there's somebody up top who didn't really get it and wasn't the champion for it that it needed. And I would have loved to have seen more Charles Laughton films for sure.
Oh,
I mean,
I really want to see The Man on the Eiffel Tower now.
Yeah. We'll see what that's based on.
I'm very curious about that. I just loved this. You can just see there's just it's so faithful to the book.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that you cannot give everybody's perspective in a film. You just can't. It gets it doesn't work. But he gives you just enough in these performances that you see in Ruby's face. You see her become totally smitten with this monster. And you see Rachel just come and yank her up out of there.
It starts great. I mean, it has John out in the backyard, and then his dad just shows up, and it's Peter Graves, and he's
he's on the run.
Yeah. And
yeah.
You're immediate. I mean, this movie is an hour and a half. It just goes by. And I don't know, did you see it on Criterion? I did. You can.
I did.
Yeah. And there are alternate soundtracks they have. So you can, and so mine was a couple of film professors were talking about the movie, and it just added even more depth to all the different scenes. And
it's so good.
And I'll say the same thing. How is this not a bigger hit? I don't understand.
I'm baffled.
Yeah.
But it's there for you guys. You can watch it. Read the book. They're both so good, but book or movie, what do you think?
I have to say this, it's a tie.
It's a tie.
Because I'd probably read this again.
It's that good. It truly is that good.
But I love this movie, and there's love and hate. And if you've seen Do the Right Thing, and there's a whole scene in Do the Right. Yeah. I mean, this is one of Spike Lee's favorite movies, and you could totally see why this would be his jam. The music is good. The cinematography is amazing.
Every single thing.
There's a shot, a depth of perspective shot where he's on a horse and he's going up the mountain, and the kids are hiding in a barn. And it was a little person on a donkey that went up, and that's how he shot it. But it looks like it's Robert Mitchum on a horse, and
it really does.
And he's coming to get them, and the whole thing with the singing of the Christian songs that have terrifying coming from this evil man.
Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms.
Leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, leaning on the everlasting arms.
Shame on you, Ruby. Mooning around the house after that mad dog of a man. Merciful heavens. Ruby, go get the children out of bed and bring them down here. Women are such germ fools.
How is he not nominated? I don't get it. It's such a performance from him.
I know a couple of people that I was watching, and they said, well, he was probably scarier in Cape Fear. And I'm like, I don't know. I think he's pretty damn scary
real
here.
Scary.
Yeah.
He's very scary in Cape Fear. I will grant you that, but this is scarier.
Yes.
And I think this performance is more, it just has more levels to it, I think, than that character. I think he's wonderful in Cape Fear, but I think he's doing a lot more here. It's so good. Anyway, yeah. I also I'm edging a little bit towards the film only because of him. I think he's just so, mainly because of Robert Mitchum, I think is so wonderful. Like, you cannot, I read the book and then watched the film, having experienced neither, and I can't picture that character any other way ever again. That's him. He's him. So tie.
Yeah.
Tie. Now, as we mentioned at the top of the show, for us here in the United States, next week is election week.
I don't know if you've heard about it.
Gosh. Okay, just give me a second.
We all want it done.
We all do. Let me just grab onto something solid for a second here. So that means that we are both going to be very busy. We are volunteering to make sure that people get out and vote. Very, 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 very important. As I say, every election, we won't tell you who to vote for, but we will tell you to vote. You must go out and vote. You must. So we're going to be busy. We will not be around during our normal recording time. So that's why we will be replaying Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which I think is the perfect thing to take your mind off of. I think I may even be watching Chitty Chitty Bang Bang next weekend as I'm resting from knocking on doors. Then the following week, though, we couldn't possibly not mark here at Book versus Movie, not mark the passing of the great, legendary Maggie Smith. And who we lost, Dame Maggie Smith, and we lost not too long ago. We talked about the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and we talked about Death on the Nile, and I think some other stuff too. We just love the woman, and so we wanted to do something special. So when we come back from after the election,
the after times.
Oh gosh, in the after times. All right, it'll be fine. We will be covering a movie that doesn't get talked about with her too much. We're going to be talking about Travels with My Aunt, which is a Graham Greene novel. And we've never talked about Graham Greene before either, I don't think, on this show.
No, I don't
so that
think
will also be exciting. And so that's going to be our next one. If you want to follow along with us, it's easy to get your hands on the book and the movie. We're going to be talking about the Maggie Smith, underrated, once again, classic Travels with My Aunt.
Okay, everybody. So all those places we mentioned at the top of the show, please send us your suggestions for books. Once again, it could be a song, a play, a poem, anything. Like, just think about it. Magazine article. Our email, once again, is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. I am at brooklynfitchick.com. I'm at brooklynfitchick for Threads and Instagram. For TikTok and Twitter, I am at Brooklyn Margot. And at my YouTube, I'm at Margot Donahue. And Margot, where can they find you?
Mine's a lot simpler. You can find me online at coloniavook.com. All my social media, including YouTube, is at She's Nacho Mama. And for information on when you will be able to see our video, I mean, we'll be uploading the audio of all the episodes going forward now. So don't worry if you're a Spreaker listener, you will not miss out. But we will be mentioning like when we'll be doing an upcoming video episode in the Facebook group. So keep your eyes peeled on there. And happy Halloween, everybody.
We'll be back soon with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We're a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You could find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. You could find us on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Book versus a Movie. Just spell that all out. We have a Patreon page. Type in there Book vs. Movie Podcasts, where you can find 8 years worth of shows. You can follow Margot D on social media at Brooklyn Margot and also Brooklyn Fit Chick. You can find Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thank you again for listening, and please be sure to send along your suggestions for the show. Remember, the book needs to be easy to get your hands on, and the movie has to be streaming on a major platform. We will be back soon with a new episode.